What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I am teaching you my curveball, but if you want to learn how to throw it, you're going to have to hit that subscribe button right now because this video is made for my subscribers only, so I will give you a chance to do that. Okay, so today we are talking about pitch design. Now pitch design is something that I've been doing since 2009 or 2010-ish. It's a concept that I introduced to the world back in 2013 in this video right here. So if you haven't watched that video, you can check it out. I'm going to go over a lot of the same concepts, but I understand it a lot better now than I did back then. I also have much better film than I did back then, and I figured 8 years later it's probably time for a little bit of a refresh. So, what is pitch design? Well, it's how to get the ball to move like you want it to move. And in order to understand how to do that, the first thing you have to understand is why a ball moves in the first place. So let's talk about that. Here on the screen you can see a baseball that I have with some green axis lines, and that's just to make it easier to see what's going on. And if you put this little graph up here in the top corner, if you're looking at that, if the ball moves in the top right portion of the graph that's highlighted in red here, that means the ball is going to have some lift to it and it's going to have some movement to the right. Now it's not actually going to have lift because gravity is pushing it down, but we're going to ignore gravity for a second and we're just going to talk about the forces that the spin itself creates. So if you have lift and movement to the right, it's going to end up in the top right quadrant. If you have lift and movement to the left, it's going to end up in the top left quadrant. That might be like a left-handed fastball. If you have drop and movement to the left, it's going to end up in the left-hand quadrant, and that's like a right-handed curveball maybe. And if you have drop and movement to the right, that's going to end up in the bottom right-hand quadrant, and that might be like a lefty curveball. Okay, so now that we understand that, what if a ball is spinning like these arrows on the screen right here? Well, that's what we call gyro spin, or bullet spin, or football spin. Now, if you've ever thrown a football and you throw a perfect spiral, you know that the ball doesn't move right or left or anything like that. It just kind of goes straight. Now, gravity's going to pull it down, of course, but it doesn't go left or right. If you've thrown a bad football, you know that thing kind of curves off to the left or curves off to the right if it's not in an exact spiral. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Similarly with a bullet, it spins around in a circle so it stays straight. So you can see in the movement plot up here in the top right corner that this ball is going to move dead straight. It's not going to rise or fall or move to the right or move to the left. It's going to be dead center. So it's important to understand that gyro spin is going to produce no movement due to spin. And you can see in the top left corner here, I have backspin, front spin, side spin to the right, side spin to the left, and gyro spin. So the ball spinning like this is going to produce 100% gyroscopic spin. Now it's important to talk about the absolutes: 100% gyroscopic spin, 100% backspin, or 100% side spin, because then we'll start mixing them and you'll have a framework to be able to fit in when we start mixing and understand it. So what if the ball is spinning like this? Well, this would mean the back of the ball is spinning up and the front of the ball is spinning down. Now when you're talking about anything but gyro spin, it's important to understand that it's really the direction the front of the ball is spinning. So we would all know this pitch as a dead 12-6 curveball. The front of the ball is spinning from the top 12 to the bottom 6, and you can see this is going to produce movement straight down, nothing to the right and nothing to the left, straight down. And you can see that in the top right corner here. And in our little bar graph in the top left, you can see it's going to be 100% front spin. Similarly, if this is spinning dead to the side, you can see the dot move over there to the right. Now, it's a little bit tricky to understand this. The back of the ball is spinning towards the left, which means the front of the ball is spinning towards the right. And if the front of the ball is spinning directly towards the right, you're going to get 100% side spin towards the right, and the ball is going to move to the right. Now, if we go a step further, now this ball is spinning with 100% backspin. You can see the red dot move. You're going to get 100% movement upwards, no movement right or left, but a lot of the movement, or all the movement directly upwards, fighting gravity, and you're going to end up with 100% backspin. And if we go one more step, this ball is spinning 100% towards the left, so it's going to move all the way towards the left. The front of the ball is going towards the left, all the movement will be in that direction. So let's mix these together. What happens if the ball is spinning like this? Well, you have a little bit of top spin because the front of the ball is spinning downward a little bit, and you have a little bit of side spin towards the left. And so you can see the red dot on the movement plot is going to move a little bit down and a little bit to the left. And you can see that on the bar charts here. We're going to get about 50% spin downward and front spin, and about 50% spin to the side to the left. What if the ball is spinning kind of like this? Well, now you're going to have some backspin, and you're going to have a little bit of side spin towards the right. So no longer are you going to have front spin and side spin to the left. Those bars are actually going to go to backspin and side spin to the right. And you can see where the red dot is. You're going to get some lift, and you're going to get some movement over towards the right-handed side. This might be like a right-handed fastball. Okay, so let's talk about my curveball. Now, a couple of you last time I posted a video breaking down my cutter said that I should hold the ball in my hand and show you guys the grip. Now, I don't personally believe that grip is super important because of the reasons I mentioned in the last video, and also it's just so dependent on how your hand is and how you throw and your arm angle and all the different things that it's very hard to recommend a grip. But I have a baseball here, so this is my grip. Now, I'm taking my middle finger, that's the most important finger for this pitch, putting that on a seam. And my whole intention with this is to find somewhere that I can hook my fingertip so I can get some tension on it, so when a ball comes off my hand, it's gonna leave that finger it's gonna leave that finger last. So I want that finger to be able to pull down and add that extra little spin to it. So I find a good place for that middle finger, and then I'm curling the ring and the pinky finger underneath and not pinching it all the way. I used to do that, but it's just right over this seam. So it's not underneath the seam right there, it's kind of right by it. So I have a little bit of tension there. I'm placing the thumb right on this seam here, and that's used to hold it, kind of putting pressure back into my palm. Okay, so I'm kind of holding that there. Now, if you can see here, I'm cutting the ball in half with my thumb and my middle finger. All right, that's the important part here. You want these two are the fingers that dominate the pitch. So you want to cut the ball in half with them so you have the best grip on it possible so it doesn't slip out of your hand early. And then I actually just get my finger out of the way. I just kind of touch it to the baseball, very little tension on it. I spike it just to get it out of the way. Now, some people dig their finger in. That's not what I do. I just get that out of the way, and I'll show you guys why in a second. But before we get into that, it's important to talk about the keys to throwing this pitch. So now you have your grip, okay? You have whatever grip it's gonna be. I've seen a whole bunch of different ones, all right? But you have your grip. Now, how do you actually throw this thing? Well, that's gonna be dependent on your arm angle and the way your arm comes through and your mechanics and all that different stuff. So I'll just tell you how I throw it. Now, my keys to this pitch are pretty simple. You need to have tension on the ball. You need to split the ball in half like that, and you need to have a stiff wrist. Okay, think of like a karate chop motion. You need to have a stiff wrist. You don't want to be deviating this way, snapping down like this, twisting, anything like that. You set your wrist in a karate chop position. You have your grip, keep it stiff. You get tension on the ball. You have a seam for your finger to pull down on, and then you're just going to throw it in a karate chop motion like this. Now, if you're a side armor, you'll throw it out here, but you're still not going to let your wrist kind of bend off to the side. You're going to keep a stiff wrist. And if you want more information on how to throw my curveball, I have a couple different videos up, mainly the how to throw a gangster curveball video that you can see right here. That's over on Momentum's channel, and you guys should check that out. Anyway, that's enough about the grip and the keys to how I'm throwing it. I'm just stiff wrist, tension on the ball, karate chopping through. My last video, you guys all said that you wanted to see the pitch actually thrown, so I've included some game footage here so you can see it being thrown live. I've also included some of the practice footage that is now sped up to be real speed or just normal time. And you can see that on the screen here, as well as the slow motion of this pitch actually coming out of my hand. And you can see a super slow motion of it coming out of my hand as well. So there's the footage that we're working with today, and as I mentioned, I'm going to tell you why I spiked the ball, because it's the key to this curveball. Now, when I was younger and I threw over the top, I used to not spike it. I would grip it with two fingers together, as you can see right here, and I would just throw it, and the ball, my arm came through vertically, and the ball would roll over, and I would get a very 12-6 spin profile to it. However, when my arm slot dropped, when my posture straightened up back in 2014 or 2015, when I made that change, I had to find a way to still generate the same movement profile out of a different arm slot. So you can see here, first off, the ball slips off of my palm very early on. Okay, you can see that it's slipping off the thumb right here, and it's slipping against the palm. It's kind of rolling up into my fingers. Now, this is why I say that it's important to have tension on the middle finger, because now you can see here the ball is slipped off of my thumb. The thumb is no longer controlling any of the movement. It's ineffective now. Now, the thumb dictates when the ball comes out of your hand. As soon as it slips off the thumb, the ball's coming out of your hand. So now the middle finger is on the ball, but you can see here, if you look at how it's rotating, the ball is going to spin kind of towards, I don't know, 130 maybe, and have a little bit of gyroscopic action to it. If I keep my pointer finger on the ball instead of spiking it, it's going to induce even more gyroscopic action, which is going to take away from the total vertical movement that I can get. However, when I spike the ball, and you can see my hand coming through here, the finger is in a spiked position. As it starts to slip off my thumb and my middle finger is pulling down, you can see the pointer finger extends a little bit. Now, I don't do this consciously. I did do it on purpose when I made the change to this grip, because I was playing around with some different grips to figure out how to get rid of the gyro action, and I noticed this and I said, that's the way I can do it. This pointer finger starts in a spiked position, and then it presses forward. Now that actually serves to align the spin axis a little bit better coming out of my hand, where it would be maybe 60% efficiency. It would have a good amount of gyro angle if my pointer finger was not in a spiked position. When this pointer finger slips and presses the ball forward, it actually gives it more spin efficiency without affecting the spin rate, which is really important. Now, you want the spin rate to be as high as you can, and you want the efficiency to be as high as you can if you're trying to throw this curveball that I'm throwing here, which is intended to be a 12-6 curveball. So let's talk about how it moves and why it's going to move that way. Well, you can see when I play this sped up clip that it's going to have a lot of downward movement, and it's going to have some movement to the left. Okay, and we know from our intro of this video that that means a couple different things. It's going to have some front spin to it, but not all front spin. It's going to have some front spin. It's going to have some side spin to the left. And we just talked about it. It's going to have some gyro angle. Now, how can you tell? Well, when you watch this video through and you play it front and back, you can see an axis developing on the bottom right-hand portion of the ball. Now, looking at the ball straight from behind, you can't see the front part of the ball. So if you can see any axis developing, you know that that axis is going to be on the back half of the ball. And you know that this axis is in the bottom right-hand corner. So you know it's going to have some top spin and some side spin to the left. Okay, and it's going to have some gyro angle like we just talked about. Now, if you consider this diagram I have up here on the screen, let's break this down a little bit. You'll be familiar with this. This is from the pitcher's view, okay? And this would be a dead 12-6 curveball. You can see the axis going straight from 9 to 3, which means the movement, the direction of spin is going to go from, in this view, 6 up to 12, but we know that the movement is dictated by how the front of the ball is spinning. And in this diagram, the front of the ball would be spinning from 12 to 6, and this would be a 12-6 curveball. And you can see the movement that would create on the movement plot, and that would have 100% front spin. But that's not how this ball is spinning. If you look at where this dot is on the screen, that's about where the axis showed up on the video. So if we move the axis in the spin direction over there, that's about how it looks. And you can see how the movement changes and how the components of spin in the bar graph in the top left corner changes. So now we have spin from basically 1 to 7. Now, this is probably about 12:50, maybe 1 o'clock to, so 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock, 12:50 to 6:50, somewhere in that range. This is just an approximation, but we have some top spin and we have some side spin to the left, and you can see that reflected here. Now, if I truly wanted to get back to a 12-6 curveball, you can see what adjustments I would have to make. I would have to get the ball to spin more from 12 to 6. I would have to straighten the axis up a little bit. Instead of the axis going from 4 to 10, I would have to go from 9 to 3, and I would have to take some of this gyroscopic angle out so that it didn't have any sort of side spin. All right, and that's kind of how you go about doing pitch design. How do I want the ball to move? Well, what components of movement do I need? What components of movement do I have? And how do I get to what I need from what I have? And that's why I went to the spike curveball way back in 2014. Okay, let's look at this pitch from the top view. All right, and again, this would be 100% 12-6 spin, but that's not how this ball is spinning. You can see the dot here on the screen. That is where the dot is. You can imagine if you're looking from the rubber on the left part of the screen towards the plate, that's the angle we originally saw the film from, and that's where the axis appeared, on the right-hand side of the ball. So if we move the spin direction and the axis to match that, you can see that this doesn't have dead 12-6 spin. It definitely has a little bit of a gyro component, and it definitely has a little bit of side spin towards the left. Let's look at this from the side. Okay, now this is going to be a little bit trickier to understand, but if you had dead 12-6 spin or dead front spin, this red dot would be directly in the middle of the axis lines. But it's not there. This red dot is below it, and this red dot is to the left of it. Now imagine again, if you're looking from the back, the axis that we saw in the video was below the center of the ball, and we could see it, which means it was on the back half of the ball. So that's why this red dot is here, and you can see about how the ball is spinning with the purple line, and that's just denoting that there is definitely a little bit of gyroscopic component and also a little bit of side spin to the left. Okay, so that's why the ball moves the way it moves. That's how it comes out of my hand. That's how I grip it. Those are my thought processes on how to actually throw it. So now how do you use this thing? Well, here's some video of a fastball, okay, and you can see the profile of this curveball. The first scenario that we're going to talk about is using the curveball as a strike pitch, or in this case what I could also call a freeze pitch. The hitter is going to freeze when he sees it, and I'll show you exactly why. So here I've slowed it down and I've overlaid the fastball and the curveball. And if you remember back in my cutter video, the cutter and the fastball overlaid pretty darn well. They look like one baseball, but you can see here immediately out of the hand, there is no similarity in the trajectory of these pitches. They don't look the same, they look very different. Now some of you might be noticing that my release point is different on the curveball and the fastball, and you would be correct. You can see that it's about one baseball's width of distance between the two release points. Now, I don't think that hitters can see this. Most people would tell you that hitters cannot see this. The width that you normally have is about 6 inches, at least in my experience, before a hitter can start telling that your arm angle is different. So I cheat my curveball a little bit, I tilt my posture a little bit, I get my arm a little bit more vertical so I can maintain some of that 12-6 profile, whereas the fastball I'm more straight up, and that's kind of my natural arm slot. So this is actually pretty darn close, but it's going to make a little bit of a difference in how the ball comes out on video. Now live, real time, you can't really see that, and you can see that on the screen. I've sped these two things up so you can see what difference it is. You can't see where my arm is coming through, you just see the ball kind of in the air, and you can tell that there's a difference between the curveball trajectory and the fastball trajectory, and that's the most important thing in my opinion, is get the trajectories the same, not necessarily the release point the same. But anyway, this is a freeze pitch. Now this curveball ends up down and in to a right-handed hitter. This fastball ends up perfectly up and in to a right-handed hitter. Now you can imagine if I threw this fastball at the bottom of the zone, how much difference there would be. So if a hitter is used to looking down at a fastball and seeing the trajectory of a down fastball, and he sees this curveball, he's going to read it as a ball because it's just way up above the fastball, and he's going to take it. Also, let's talk about the horizontal component of this. This fastball ends up on the black inside. Okay, now if a hitter is reading this and he sees a couple of these fastballs, you can see this fastball starts off going kind of towards the middle and then breaks in arm side a little bit to hit the target. But this curveball starts off going directly at the hitter. It starts off going in towards the hitter. Now if a hitter has just seen a fastball that ended up perfectly in and he sees a pitch coming more in than that and higher than that, that pitch looks like it's going to be up at his head. But it's not. This curveball breaks and is actually a strike on the down and in corner. Okay, so you have vertical tunneling and horizontal tunneling that you can play with this curveball and the fastball at the top of the zone. But that's not the only way you can play with it. You can play with it speed-wise. Notice how the fastball gets to the plate and the curveball is still way, way, way far away from landing in the zone. You have about a 20-mile-an-hour speed difference on this pitch. So you can play the front-to-back game, you can play the vertical game, and you can play the horizontal game. This is why it's one of my most valuable pitches and one that I throw a lot because it's so versatile. All right, but that's about a strike pitch. That's how you can freeze a hitter for strike 3 or steal a strike without him swinging early in the count to get ahead. Let's talk about tunnel pitches, all right? Here's the same fastball that I threw, and here's the curveball that I'm going to tunnel off of it for a swing and a miss. And you can see when I overlay them, these balls are a lot closer together. Now, they're not exactly the same because of the initial release point, but if you look at the trajectory out of the hand, they're traveling almost the same path. So you can see that the curveball is a little bit above the fastball when I release it, and you can imagine if my release points were the same, these balls would be very similar to each other. Okay, now in real time, when a hitter's standing in the box, he's not going to be able to see the differences that we get to see looking at this in 750 frames per second. He gets 0.3 seconds, 0.4 seconds, something like that, really 0.2 seconds to make a decision. So he can't see these differences, and these aren't perfect tunnel pitches, but they're a lot closer. And you can see as I play these out to the plate, they actually stay up at the same height for quite a while. So it's conceivable that a hitter might read this curveball as a fastball at the top of the zone, but of course we can see where that ball ends up. It's way below the zone, and that no one is going to hit that pitch. Let's look at the horizontal component. These fastballs and this fastball and this curveball start off pretty close together. This fastball breaks to inner black, this curveball breaks to, well, the batter's box line. So they end up with, the plate is 17 inches wide and 6 inches to the batter's box line, so they end up 23 inches horizontally apart from each other. So again, another reason why this pitch is so effective for me. Now, for those of you who watched my cutter video, I took a clip of a cutter from that video, the strike cutter that I threw, and I overlaid it on these two pitches, the two that you just saw. Now, if you can see the release points, there's a lot going on there. Would be very hard for a hitter to see that in real time, and you watch how these balls travel to the plate. Yes, the curveball is definitely different than the cutter and the fastball, but it's not that different. It's only about a baseball's width of difference. Now you end up with a fastball that ends up in the top right-hand portion of the zone, up and into a righty. You end up with a cutter that ends up just off the black in the bottom third of the strike zone, and a cutter that ends up on the batter's, and a curveball, I should say, that ends up on the batter's box line way below the zone. Fastball at 95, cutter at 86, curveball at 79. There's a lot of speed differential there, and a lot of horizontal differential, and a lot of vertical differential, and that's how I fit my curveball into my arsenal. So I know that's a lot of information, a lot of rambling on my part, but hopefully you guys learned something. We went over how I grip the curveball, my cues on throwing it. If you haven't checked out that How to Throw a Gangster Curveball video, it'd be a good one because I teach you more in depth how to actually go about training it. We went over why the ball spins the way it spins, why it moves the way it moves, and how to actually utilize that movement in a game. If there's anything that I missed, if there's any improvements that you'd like me to make to the next video, please let me know. And with that being said, I'll see y'all in the next one.